God's got to bless you and protect you always, my little girl, my little girl.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Barakallahu feekum, Maulana Abdul Aziz. It's always an honor and always a pleasure for me to be part of Al Misbah Academy's webinars and digital sessions. May Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala grant us the ability to do that and to say that which will be beneficial to myself. I'm also a parent of 5 boys, mashallah. No girls. My wife always jokes and says she's the rose amongst the 6 thorns. Anyway, Bismillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillahi wa ba'd. I have been given a few key areas that the organizers felt I should touch on, and I have prepared my presentation around those key areas and around some of those points. So getting right into it, the first aspect that I've been asked to touch on is the aspect of looking for a spouse who shares your values in terms of your child's upbringing. And I think this is a very pivotal point, and it's of exceptional importance that we start off with a point like this, because there's 2 aspects here that I think we need to highlight. There's a kind of perpetuation that takes place when it comes to the style and the nature of parenting. You will notice that many times a person ends up parenting their children in a very similar way to the way their parents brought them up. So we kind of transfer the style of parenting from one generation to the next generation. There are exceptions, of course. Sometimes the whole environment dictates otherwise. Sometimes maybe you may have had some grievances with the way your parents brought you up, and you then decide to do it differently, and maybe you move from one extreme to another extreme. If your parents were ultra strict, then you become ultra lenient. But these dynamics are the dynamics that we need to be aware of. So the first thing is that you need to know in the person that you are going to wed, what kind of environment that they coming from, what kind of parents did they have, what's the nature of their lifestyle, because that is likely, not necessarily, but it's very likely to have an impact on their own parenting style, and the way they would bring up their children would in many ways mirror and reflect the way that they were brought up by their own parents. So that's the first point I wanted to make under this particular section, that when you're getting married to someone, boy or girl, you've got to do in the corporate world, they use the word due diligence. You've got to find out. There's only so much you can find out, obviously. The rest you have to then trust in Allah after making your mashwaras and your istikharas and whatever else. But this is a specific aspect that you need to take into adequate consideration when deciding on choosing a spouse. Another reason why this is so important is because later on in life, after finance, one of the primary factors for contention in marriage, for tension in marriage, research seems to suggest that finance is one of the main factors. But another one of the main factors is when there's constant dispute amongst the parents in terms of how to bring up the children. There may be one parent who feels, no, we need to be disciplinarians. We need to draw the line, and they need to know where the line is, and that they should not overstep. There may be the other parent who feels that, you know what, we need to be very lenient with our children, and we need to take a different approach. So what happens that each one feels that the other one is undermining them, and the children then will inevitably play the one off against the other. So it's important that you understand the temperament, the mizaj, the disposition of the person that you intend to marry within reasonable limits. It's not possible to understand it fully, especially within the parameters of the Sharia in terms of how we go about looking for a spouse. Otherwise, if you've got 2 very different views and approaches towards how parenting should take place, in an otherwise good marriage, it could create constant complications. That said, it doesn't mean that husband and wife will always agree, even if they have more or less the same approach in mind. Like anything else, there would be differences of opinion. One may be a bit softer, the other one may be a bit sterner. One may be a bit softer with the one that they fond of, the other one may be a bit sterner with the kids that are not their favorites. I don't have the time to labor the point because I want to go into the other sections and the other points, but I want to mention this before I go into the next section. The aspect of religiosity is something that you need to give real thought and consideration to. Look, the fundamentals we all know. You have to perform salah, you have to give your zakah, that kind of thing. But then there's a lot of different levels in terms of how people practice their deen and how they express their faith. From the level of taqwa you want to exhibit in your clothing. I'm just giving you as an example. Now, when you have spouses that are totally mismatched in terms of their religiosity, then it plays out in terms of the upbringing of the children. And that is something that we need to keep in mind. That when you're finding a spouse, now remember, there's different stages to this discussion, right? This is the first stage, and the title of this stage is the beginning stages. So that's why we're talking about these fundamentals. Some of you may have passed this. You may already have children, and now you may be thinking that why the aspect of looking for a spouse, even though you may have passed this particular stage. There may be others who haven't passed the stage. Number one. Number two, this is something that you would have to pass on to the next generation in terms of these aspects. So when you talk about things like marriage and when you talk about things like parenting, not everyone is at the same level. Some people are at the tail end of their parenting. The kids are perhaps about to get married and leave the house. Others are at the beginning stages of parenting. So therefore, it's important that we keep a broad mind, because knowledge is always beneficial for a believer, even if you're not exactly at that particular stage. So religiosity, because people interpret their faiths in a very different ways, and they express that in very different ways, because one is that which is fundamental, that which is non-negotiable, that which is quite clear-cut. So you can't have a difference of opinion amongst the parents in terms of whether the kid should perform salah or not perform salah, for example. But in terms of how much they should cover, how, to what extent should the clothing be modest. I'm just using clothing as one example. That all plays out if there's a big imbalance between the two parents. So I think it's a key point that the organizers have noted for us to touch on, that parenting starts not just when the child is born or when the child comes of age where they can now start understanding. Parenting starts way before that. Like I've explained, your parenting to some extent is already shaped by the way your parents parent you, or the way your extended family parent you when you're growing up. The second thing is parenting to a large extent is also determined by the disposition and by the nature and the qualities of the two spouses. Now, moving on to the second area, and again, I must put in a qualification here, if you like, or maybe not a qualification, but an explanation that in the kind of time frame that we have for this kind of discussion, you cannot cover all areas, nor can you go into the required depth in terms of all of the areas and do justice to it. It's just not simply possible. What we're trying to achieve here is to throw out a few points of reflection under each one of these sections. And the sections themselves will not cover the entire topic about the beginning stages of parenting. So it's to stimulate thought, and then hopefully you'll take it further and you'll read up in terms of the good material that's out there. You listen to further lectures, you'll engage further with people of experience and people of knowledge to then take it to the next level in terms of your own understanding and your own knowledge of these matters. So this short discourse is just to bring the points to the fore, to throw out a few points of reflection, and to stimulate you to start the process. The second point that we've been asked to focus on is the mindset that needs to be developed by both parents when they're preparing for a baby. And the reason for this is that kids are a reflection of us. Your children are a reflection of us, and many times you need to work on yourself before you can work on your children. There's a few points that I want to share under this particular subheading. Firstly, there's a kind of human need that we have to become parents. People want to become parents because you want to have something of your own. You want to become parents. This is intrinsic. This is natural because you want someone to care for you, someone that will love you, somebody that's a part of you. somebody that will succeed you, somebody that you can set up because you know that you're not going to live forever. These are natural things. Allah has created it such, otherwise the world would not function. People would not want to have children, and the procreation will not take place, and the human race would have become extinct. But there's a greater goal here. There's a greater objective. There's a greater calling. Your child is an investment, and that investment could determine your success or your failure, not only in this world, but in the akhirah as well. If you look at this dunya, there can be no greater joy than to see your own children succeed and make you proud. You ask any parent, they'll tell you, I'm more proud of the success of my kids than I'm proud of my own success. And there can be no greater burden, there can be no greater embarrassment in this world than when your kids let you down. And any parent, may Allah make it easy for whoever is going through this difficulty, and may Allah protect whoever is not in this situation. There can be no greater challenge in life that when your children start posing a challenge to you. Ask those parents whose children, who unfortunately have become, who have succumbed to taking of drugs and have lost their way in life and are involved in behavior that's not only embarrassing, but it's immoral, it's un-Islamic. So when Allah blesses you with a child, apart from the fact, like the MC had said, it's an amana, and an amana for which you will have to account, it's an investment. I want to refer you to a verse of Surah Yasin, where Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala mentions, Inna nahnu nuhyil mawta. We are the ones who give life to those who are dead, meaning we will resurrect them. وَنَكْتُبُ مَا قَدَّمُوا وَآثَارَهُم. The angels who record the book, who record the deeds of humans, they record what you send forward and what you leave behind. Now here the Mufassirin have unpacked this, and they say, what you send forward are the deeds that you have done yourself, both good and bad. What you leave behind, وَآثَارَهُم, there are different categories. One is, for example, your sadaqah jariyah. Maybe you sponsored a borehole or you built a masjid. So whatever good will be done there, you'll get the share of the reward long after your eyes have closed, long after you have passed on. But whatever wrong you have initiated, if you put somebody upon the path of an evil act, and they continue with that after you have passed on, you continue to get the equivalent sin. And if they pass it on to somebody else, you still continue to get the equivalent sin because you were the initiator. And this is where children come in. Here the Mufassirin have said, your children are a clean slate. Allah says, فِطْرَةَ اللَّهِ الَّتِي فَطَرَ النَّاسَ عَلَيْهَا. Allah creates every human. Allah creates every human with the natural inclination towards belief in the oneness of Allah and the natural inclination towards goodness. Now it's up to the parents, the kind of environment that the parents expose the children to, the kind of upbringing that the children are given by their parents, that would determine whether they would build on that natural inclination towards goodness, or whether that natural inclination towards goodness will be suppressed and then they will incline otherwise. That's the general rule. Of course, there are exceptions. Nuh alayhi salam was a great prophet. He did everything right as a father, but his son lost his way. Now that is out of your control. You are only in control up to a particular level. But to that level that you are in control and you have discretion, your children are a clean slate. And that is the enormity of the responsibility. And it becomes your investment. If you do it right, it will bring you joy in this world, but it will bring you great reward in the after. I give a simple example. You teach your child to read Surah Fatiha. Your child will then teach your grandchild will teach your great-grandchild, will continue. For as long as the goodness continues, you continue to get the reward. But if you teach them something wrong, and they in turn practice on that, you continue to get the sin, even if you're no longer alive. And if they perpetuate that and pass it on to the next generation, you continue to get the sin as well. So that should open our eyes, and that should be the mindset that we need to be developing when we're preparing for the arrival of a baby. Unfortunately, the arrival of a baby these days, it's pretty much like when we're preparing for a marriage. It's all on the material aspects. So I'm going to get married. Which hall am I going to book? Which cook am I going to reserve? Where I'm going to get the dress made? Where I'm going to get the suit sewn? Who we're going to invite? Who we're not going to invite? Where we're going to get the money from? All the focus is on those material aspects, and very little focus is on the emotional, mental, and spiritual preparation for marriage. Similarly, when it comes to the couple are happy, and so you should. Okay, we've conceived. We are pregnant. Now it's all about which gynecologist are you going to use, or which midwife are you going to use, what is the name of the baby, where are we going to give birth, and this and that and the other, this shower, this function, that function. But mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, The couple are not preparing for the arrival of the baby. So you're not going into parenting with the right mindset. What I'm sharing with you may sound very elementary and very basic, but these are the very basics that have escaped us today, and it costs us then an entire generation. And this is where education comes into play. You'd find many women, for example, reading books on the physical aspects of motherhood. So, what kind of birth am I going to have? What's it going to be like suckling the child? What's it going to be like this? They even maybe go for courses. But how many of us will pick up a book or sit with a scholar or sit with the elderly and say, right, I want to mentally, emotionally, and spiritually prepare myself for the arrival of this baby, which inshallah Allah is going to bless us with. What are my responsibilities as a parent? What should be changing in me now spiritually? I'll just give you on the spiritual aspect one example, a quick example in passing. Those women who read Quran excessively when they are expecting, it has been proven time and again that has had a spiritual benefit for the child. I'll tell you why. Science has proven that the first faculty, the first sense of a baby that's growing in the mother's belly that is activated is the sense of hearing. So what you talk, what you listen to, what you recite already starts to have an impact on the development of the child whilst the child is in the womb of the mother. Today they tell you from a medical perspective that if you're an alcoholic whilst you are pregnant, the child will be born with complications arising from that because it's going into the system. But spiritually, what you are going through during those 9 months, and and the husband as well, because you exist as a couple, what you speak, your state of mind, your level of spirituality, all of that has an impact. We may not exactly be able to understand it or explain it, but it's there. It's gleaned from the traditional teachings, and even modern science has started to prove it, that those children come out either with advantages or disadvantages as a result of what was happening, not after they were born, but already when they were still developing in the womb of the mother. That even after the child is born, for the first 2-3 years, you may think, well, this kid doesn't have the ability to comprehend, to fathom, to understand. It's just a child that cries and eats and is still finding its way in life. That couldn't be further from the truth. What you imbibe in there is happening subconsciously, and much later in life, all of these things come to the fore. If you speak to psychologists, you speak to counselors, they sometimes take them through these processes. Problems that arise later in life are rooted in what happened in the very initial stages. So preparation is key. Prior to marriage, after marriage, at the time when you receive the news now that you are expecting as a couple, not only the physical, material, financial preparation, but the emotional, mental, and spiritual preparation. And that goes hand in hand with education. You cannot divorce education. You've got to tap into the right sources of knowledge to prepare yourself as a parent for the arrival of the child. That said, that's the second category that I was asked to touch on with regards the aspect of parenting, right? When it comes to the beginning stages. The third aspect in a bit. What is our role and responsibility in our children's life? What is our role and our responsibility in our children's life? To some extent, I've alluded to this already when I quoted the verse where Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala says, فِطْرَةَ اللَّهِ الَّتِي فَطَرَ النَّاسَ عَلَيْهَا, that Allah is giving you a clean slate. Now it's up to you what you do with the clean slate. That's the scale of the responsibility. But there's great positives that go in this, right? Everything you do for your child is considered an ibadah. I want to reach out to our mothers and sisters for a moment. Today we live in a world where breastfeeding is not given the due importance that it ought to. Now there may be some because of medical reasons or genuine legitimate reasons they can't breastfeed. That's a different matter. Now breastfeeding is inconvenient. It's hard. The kid doesn't understand your timetable. The kid doesn't understand, or the baby doesn't understand day from night, busy from not busy. At the oddest of times, the baby wants to be fed. But if you look at the ahadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for every drop that you suckle your child, you're getting a reward. You cannot begin to even count how many drops have been consumed by one child, let alone multiple children. And for those who don't have children, I'll speak about this hopefully towards the end if we have time. But niyatul mu'min khayrun min amali. The intention of a believer is more important than the action. Make the intention that, oh Allah, if you bless me with the child, these are the things that I'm going to do. All the right things, like breastfeeding, for example. Even if Allah in His wisdom doesn't give you a child and it's not decreed for you, you'll get the reward of it because you had the intention. On the occasion of Tabuk, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, when they were returning, he told the Sahaba, there are people who are sitting in Medina who never joined us on this expedition. But for every step that you take, they're getting the equivalent reward because they had the intention. It was circumstances that deprived them. Those who don't have children, listen to this. Never lose hope in the mercy of Allah. Continue to turn to Allah. Realize Allah knows what is best for you better than what you know for yourself. You may not understand it in this world, but in the akhirah, you'll realize why Allah deprived you and why Allah granted others. That is in the knowledge of Allah. But continue to make the intention. And for every time you make the intention, you get the equivalent reward of those who are parents. And for every time you make the dua, even if you don't see the manifestation of the acceptance of the dua, immediately Allah continues to reward you. So coming back to the aspect of breastfeeding, right? For every drop you get reward. Then it's the mother's first gift to the child. The bond that is developed between the child and the mother is undescribable, and to a large extent that bond is as a result of the mother carrying the child in the belly and the mother breastfeeding the child. And the Quran talks about it in various verses. وَحَمْلُهُ وَفِصَالُهُ ثَلَاثُونَ شَهْرًا. Apart from all the other medical benefits and psychological benefits that go with it, it's a different discussion all on its own. From the father's perspective, the primary financial responsibility of the kid lies on your shoulders. Alhamdulillah, most fathers do for their children. But sometimes, shaitan may make you feel, look at these kids, I do everything for them. They don't appreciate, they'll move on in their own life afterwards. They don't look at the children of today. They don't look after their parents. They put their parents in old age homes, old care. They disrespect their parents. Of course, it's wrong for them to do that. But remember, your reward is not hinged on how those children will react later in life. Inna Allah la yudhi'u ajra al-muhsinin. Allah will reward you for your intention and for your action. Well, if they appreciate, it's a bonus. Of course, as a human, if they don't appreciate, it hurts you, it's natural. But if they appreciate, it's a bonus. Now, there's a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam here, that for every cent that you spend on your family, it's considered to be sadaqah and charity. We sometimes think that charity is only when I give to the masjid or when I give for relief in a place where there has been a catastrophe. But what we fail to understand is that the bulk of what you earn is spent on your family. It's spent on those people that you are responsible for. And the hadith instructs us in this regard that وَابْدَأْ بِمَنْ تَعُولُ, that start off with those who are your first and primary responsibility, and that would be your spouse and your children, and after that your parents if they require, etc. So every cent that you spend, if your intention is right and if it's earned in a halal way, that is charity. And every second that you spend earning it, because you've got to go to the job every day and work for 8 hours a day, or you've got to go to your business every day to be able to earn the income to sustain your dependence. Every second that you spend, if your intention is right and if it's done in the right way, is ibadah. I want to emphasize and re-emphasize that point. Mothers and sisters, when you're changing the diapers, and I'm not only saying mothers and sisters must change diapers, but it's most of the time done by them. Men must also help. There's absolutely nothing wrong in changing a diaper. There's absolutely nothing wrong in helping with the bathing and the changing of the kid. But that is ibadah, as strange as it may sound. When you go out and you earn money to spend on your children, that is ibadah, and all that spending and that expenditure is considered charity. There's one important point here, though, that we should remember. It must be halal, and it must be spent on halal. Many times as parents, we let the love for our children overwhelm our love for Allah, and that is wrong. لا طاعة لمخلوق في معصية الخالق. The kid wants a particular dress, but that dress is un-Islamic. Now, when you purchase that becomes haram. That's a sin. And that they wear it, and that sin, you also carry the burden because you allowed it. Your love for the kid is not a justification. Remember, on the day of Qiyamah, Allah says, يَوْمَ يَفِرُّ الْمَرْءُ مِنْ أَخِيهِ وَأُمِّهِ وَأَبِيهِ. On that day, those very children will run away from you and you have to be taken to task for the responsibility of your action. So never go and earn haram just because you want to give your children what others who have more wealth than you can give their children. Remember the story of Umar bin Abdul Aziz, rahmatullah alayh, right? The Khulafa and the Khalifas behind him left a lot of wealth for their progeny, because they indulged un-Islamically, illegitimately, in a haram manner, by taking from the public coffers. But when he came in, he abolished that. There was a time when his children didn't even have new clothes for Eid. When he was on his deathbed, he told his children, I leave you with nothing in terms of material wealth, but I've never fed you one day 1 cent of haram. His predecessor was Sulaiman bin Abdul Malik, who left a lot of wealth for his children. People say after Umar bin Abdul Aziz passed away, they would find the children of Sulaiman bin Abdul Malik begging on the streets, even though their father had left a lot of haram wealth for them. And Umar bin Abdul Aziz, who left no wealth for his kids were given great honor and great status in society. Look at this incident in Surah Al-Kahf, where Khadir and Musa alayhi salam, they protected wealth under the wall. وَكَانَ أَبُوهُمَا صَالِحًا. The Quran tells us Allah made a provision for their inheritance to be protected because their parents were pious. So never do something which is impermissible, which is haram, which is najais, which is un-Islamic, to please your kids, because it will not generate benefit in this world in the true sense, and it will create a complication for you in this world as well as in the hereafter. The last point under this section, and perhaps one of the most important points that I want to share with you, brothers and sisters, this morning, well, it's afternoon now in South Africa, but it's still morning on your side, is that have expectations in Allah alone. Do what is necessary for your children, then do what is beyond necessary out of love. Most of us don't just give our children enough to keep them alive. We don't just buy them two sets of clothing, one to wear and one to wash. They have a whole wardrobe full. We give them the best of foods. We take them for holidays. We let them indulge. We spoil them because we love them, right? But never have expectations that they will return the favor. The greatest disappointment in life is when you find parents in the latter part of their life. There are mothers who brought up their kids alone after being divorced or after being widowed. And they went through great toil to bring up those kids. And those kids deserted the very mother in the latter part of life. Now the mother had expectation that, no, I'll do this and I'll do that and I'll educate my child. And then my child will take me here and take me there and build this for me and give that for me. And when the child doesn't deliver, you become so demoralized, you become so depressed that you lose your balance. No. Have expectations in Allah alone. Whatever you do for your children, do for the pleasure of Allah. If your children let you down, it's natural you will be disappointed, but it won't break you. It won't incapacitate you mentally or emotionally, because you know you never did it because you wanted them to return the favor. You did it because it was the right thing to do, and you had expectations in Allah, and you anticipate your reward by Allah, and your reward is secure by Allah. The next area that I've been asked to touch on is the aspect of laying the foundations of Iman from a young age and teaching the kids the basics. SubhanAllah. I want to start off with the point here that it's so vital and so important to make dua for your children. And not only to make dua for the material prosperity of your children, but for the spiritual prosperity of your children. I want to run you through a few very quick examples. In Surah Al Imran, Allah Ta'ala talks about Hannah, the mother of Maryam. Now, if you look at Maryam radiallahu anha, she's the only woman who's got the honor of her name being mentioned in the Quran, number one. Number two, she's the only woman who's given birth to a child without the intermediary of a man. Number three, she gave birth to a child who was a Nabi, Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. So such a remarkable child and such a remarkable grandchild. But where did it come from? It came from a noble intention. إذ قالت امرأة عمران رب إني نذرت لك ما في بطني محررا فتقبل مني. In those days, parents used to make their children waqf. They used to give one child as waqf for the service of Masjid Al-Aqsa. And it used to be normally a boy. So she made dua. And as soon as she got the news that she had conceived, she made dua and she said, oh Allah, grant me a child that I can make waqf to Masjid Al-Aqsa. So indirectly she was asking for a boy. فلما وضعتها قالت رب إني وضعتها أنثى وليس الذكر كالأنثى. Oh Allah, now you've blessed me with a girl. My intention was to make it waqf. She was in a dilemma now. Zakaria alayhi salam, who was her uncle, he said, no, you can still fulfill this. Even though it's a girl, she can be made waqf for Masjid al-Aqsa. But because of the noble intention coupled by the dua of Hannah, the mother of Maryam, Allah says, فَتَقَبَّلَهَا رَبُّهَا بِقَبُولٍ حَسَنٍ وَأَنْبَتَهَا نَبَاتًا حَسَنًا. I don't have the time to go into the depths of the tafsir of the verse, but here Allah Ta'ala says she was accepted in the most beautiful way, and she was set up for the most beautiful of existence. Look at the verse of the Quran that talks to Maryam. Ya Maryamu inna Allah astafaki wa tahharaki wa astafaki ala nisa'il alamin. Allah has chosen you and purified you and given you rank over all of the women of the world of your time. How did that happen? It started with the noble intention and the noble supplication of the mother. And then it led on to more. Zakaria alayhi salam saw Maryam eating fruit out of season, so he made dua for children in old age. And because he made dua, again, look at the dua of Zakaria alayhi salatu wasalam, dhurriyatan tayyibah. Oh Allah, grant me pure offspring. Allah granted him the son Yahya. And Allah said nobody else was named Yahya, and he would have remarkable qualities. When you look at Ibrahim alayhi salam, he made dua, Rabbi habli min as-salihin. Oh Allah, grant me pious offspring. Allah says, فَبَشَّرْنَاهُ بِغُلَامٍ حَلِيمٍ. We gave him the glad tidings of a tolerant son. So an effective dua to make is from the end of Surah Al-Furqan. رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ وَجَعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. That dua is for a good spouse and for good pious offspring and for offspring that will be the delight of your eyes in this world as well as in the hereafter. The second thing is, remember, they say in Arabic, al-ummu madrasatun. The first madrasa is the mother. And to a larger extent, or to an extent beyond that, both the parents, al-ummu madrasatun. Long before the kid goes to the madrasa and learns alif, ba, and surah Fatiha, and surah Ikhlas, and how to make wudu, and how to perform salah, long before that, the teaching has already started. And you know what kind of teaching there? It's not formal teaching, where you sit down with a book and you say, right, this is alif, this is ba. It's teaching about them understanding the purpose of their existence. You know, when you give them food, you make sure you give it to them in the right hand. When you eat, Bismillah. My darling, where did the food come from? It came from Allah. My darling, who must we thank for the food? We must thank Allah. My darling, Allah won't be happy with this. My darling, Allah will be happy with this. In short, in especially the world that we live in today, where from the palms of their hands, our kids can tap into an entire other world, where the values are totally alien to what Islam preaches and what Islam advocates. In those initial years, what they call the formative years, we need to establish within them a strong sense of identity, to the point that later on in life, they must be proud to be Muslim. Oh, my daughter, we're covering you, we're not exposing you, but not as a burden to you. Explain to them the wisdoms. You know, many times when we grow up, our parents would tell us, you don't read Salah, you're going Jahannam. Now that may be, factual from a textual perspective. There's no doubt about that. But are you setting up the child to read Salah for the right reasons? Why not explain to them the benefits of Salah? My child, you're talking to Allah. Allah is listening to you. Allah is responding to you in the heavens. My child, you wake up early in the morning to watch a soccer match because it's in another time zone. Let's wake up early in the morning and connect with Allah. My child, when you put your head in sajda, that's when your connection with Allah is beyond 5G. It's at its highest. You must lift up your hands, talk to Allah, ask Allah. Like that mother would train her child. Even though she had prepared the meal, but she would say to a child every time it was meal time, go and make dua, Allah must give you food. And the child will make dua. Then the child will come to the kitchen and the mother will say, Allah has provided food. And one day the mother ran late and the food was provided from the unseen. Now, I'm just giving you basic examples because of time constraints. But it's the point that I'm sharing with you, that as you're going along, you must consciously parent your child. You must talk about Allah, talk about the fundamentals of Islam. At that time, you're not going to be able to talk about masail, from fiqh and what is permissible and impermissible in the details of things. That will come later. They'll go to madrasa as they get educated, they listen to talks, etc., and they'll read books. But establishing a relationship of love with Allah and creating an identity of being proud that when they go out there, they mustn't just practice Islam out of fear, or they mustn't just practice Islam out of ritual. They must practice Islam because they are proud. As parents, we cannot abdicate our responsibility in this regard to the teachers. That no, I'll enroll them in a Muslim school, I'll send them to the maktab, and they'll teach them all of these things. That will come. But by the time they even get enrolled there, you ought to have already established within them that sense of identity. The foundation must be laid, then it will be built. If the foundation is solid, alhamdulillah, everything will fall into place after that. If not, even when we talk, why can't we do this? Everybody else is doing it, but in Islam it's haram. Why don't we do it? Oh, this is why we don't eat this food. This is why pork meat is haram for us. Make them take pride in the fact that we are abstaining. Not that they must feel that, oh, Islam has deprived us. Hey, it looks so yummy. Everybody else is consuming it. You know, when they see, or whatever the case may be. The most important thing you can do as a parent is to make sure that salah is established in the routine, the daily routine of your child, in a way that they enjoy performing salah, in a way that they will perform salah even when you're not looking. Because when the salah is in order, everything else will fall in place. Umar radiallahu anhu once wrote a letter to all of his governors, and he said that inna ahamma amrikum indi as-salah. The most important thing is salah. فَمَنْ حَفِظَهَا وَحَفَظَ عَلَيْهَا فَقَدْ حَفِظَ الدِّينَ. You protect your salah, your deen is protected. If your salah is vulnerable, your deen is vulnerable. Today, how much can we protect our children? We can't isolate them totally. We can't shackle them. They have access to social media. They go out, they meet other kids from other environments. They're going to go out in the world. There are people who don't believe in Allah. There are people who attribute partners to Allah. There are all sorts. We live in a cosmopolitan environment. But if salah is solid, then Allah says, Inna salata tanha anil fahsha'i wal munkar. That salah protects the child from all types of evils. But the salah must be there in the right way and for the right reasons. There's much that can be said also under that particular chapter, but let's move on. There's still some ground that we need to cover. The next aspect that I've been asked to talk on is the ways to discipline a toddler and a young child. Now, the elder amongst us may say, you know what, when I grew up, it was all about six of the best, and we grew up the better for it. Nowadays, all these rules and regulations have prohibited it. Even parents can't, mete out corporal punishment. Teachers can't mete out corporal punishment. It's an offense by law, etc., etc. That's a notion among some people, especially those who are a little bit elderly. Then there are those who feel that no, it must be totally easy. Your children must be able to speak to you about in whichever way they want. They can throw tantrums. They can use vulgar language, and you must just be all easy about it. Don't infringe on the child's rights. Don't be too harsh on the child. As always, the right place is somewhere in the middle, and there can be no better example than the example of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Now, discipline, it depends also how you define it, right? Discipline is not only about corporal punishment. It's not only about the cane. Discipline is about a structure that you put in place, rules and regulations, and how you monitor and how you enforce those in a way that engenders love and warmth, not in a way that generates hatred and animosity in the children. So whether you're a parent or whether you're a teacher, there's a way of doing it. And if we study from those who have experience, and if we tap into the relevant knowledge sources, we'll find there are beautiful arts. I would suggest that I've made this suggestion previously. Look at neuro-linguistic programming, and they have these tactics, and they teach you how to use softer language to appeal to the subconscious of the child, to get the child to comply, to be disciplined without having to be aggressive and confrontation with the child. I'll just give you one example in passing. They talk about an embedded command rather than a direct command. The one is start. What you waiting for? That's a direct command. The other is you may begin. You may begin. That's an embedded command. You're telling them the same thing, but softer language. And this is all found in the Sunnah of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. The other is where you tell the child, go to bed. Go to bed. It's so late. Why are you not going to bed? The other is, my darling, would you like mommy to make you a cup of tea before you go to bed? Would you like daddy to make you a milkshake before you go to bed? No, don't worry, mommy, I'm on my way to bed. And they go to bed. These are things, these are skills. We need to be humble enough to realize we don't know it all as parents. We may know what the basics are. We may know what is right from what is wrong. Having the best interests of your child at heart and having the best intentions is not adequate. You need to follow that up by educating yourself and constantly upskilling yourself. Constantly upskilling yourself. Even if you pass the parenting age, like I said, upskill your knowledge, and then you can pass it on to the others within your family and within your circle of friends. So look at how Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam enforced discipline, right? It was not about the canes being swung in all different directions all the time. That may force compliance, but it doesn't. Even at times when corporal punishment was permitted to a particular extent, it was more an exception than the rule. When it became the rule, then it led to people going to the other extreme in terms of removing it from the equation altogether. So we many times get angry with our children when we feel they've done something wrong to us. But when they've violated the commands of Allah, we don't get angry. And that's the irony. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, when Anas radiallahu anhu was given a personal task to do for Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and he got distracted with his friends, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was lenient to him. But if somebody broke the command of Allah, then Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was firm. So your kid doesn't wake up for Fajr, he doesn't bother you. But then if your kid doesn't listen to you and you say, go fetch that for me, then you get very angry. Hey, don't you know what the Quran says about the rights of parents? So is it more about your ego, or is it more about the commands of Allah? When we study the life of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam set in place the parameters. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam set in place the rules. He drew the lines, but in a way that made people see the wisdom in it. In a way that when there was discipline, it was reformative. Not that it compelled people to come into line, but then generated within them resentment and a kind of rebellion. I want to give you one example. Language is so important when it comes to discipline, because sometimes with the intention of disciplining, we break our children's confidence. We tell them, yeah, you're just so useless. How many times must I tell you? Why can't you get it right? You just don't listen. That kind of language, we can understand. Parents are humans, you get frustrated, but you're killing the confidence of the child. There's an incident which I read, which was so remarkable, that Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, when he was a kid, he was playing one day and he fell. So he started crying. The servant in the house told him in Arabic that La tabki ya Sayyid al-Arab, that, oh, the leader of the Arabs, don't cry. Now, why was she referring to him as the leader of the Arabs? Because his father was Abu Sufyan, the leader of the Quraysh at the time. So Hind, the mother, told the servant, listen, I want my child to grow up with confidence. Why are you limiting him to being the leader of the Arabs? Don't tell him, La tabqi ya Sayyid al-Arab, that don't cry, oh, leader of the Arabs. Tell him, La tabqi ya Sayyid al-Arabi wal-Ajam, that don't cry, oh, the leader of the Arabs and non-Arabs. Long story short, Muawiyah radiallahu anh became Amirul Mu'mineen for approximately 20 years, leading the Arabs and the non-Arabs with great success. So we need to build children up. Discipline is not only about hiding or grounding or removing. Now, okay, I'm going to take the PlayStation away, I'm going to take the tablet away. It's about the entire structure that you put in place within your home and within the parameters of the existence of your children, where they realize what is right from what is wrong, what they should do, what they shouldn't do, and how you manage that entire process. It must be underpinned by love and by compassion. Well, just to move towards the end, I've been asked to speak a little bit about the attributes of a successful parent. Yesterday, I gave a talk in the masjid here in South Africa, in one of the areas, and with the theme, being Sirah, because it's Rabiul Awwal, etc. I spoke about love, and I spoke about how Allah is the creator of love, and how Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is a Nabi of love, and how Islam is a religion of love. Yes, there were times when Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam got angry. There were times when Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam went to war for justified reasons. There were times when Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam meted out punishment. But I mentioned this point. I said Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam came to the worst of people. The Arabs had reached the lowest of the low. It was not just a bad time, Jahiliyyah. Abu Hasan Ali Nadwi Rahmatullah Alayhi says it was the worst of times, right? But in a period of 2 decades, he transformed those who were burying their daughters alive into those who became the golden standard and remained the golden standard up to the day of Qiyamah, the Sahaba. How did Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam do it? You can conquer a land with might and with the sword, with military power, but you can't conquer hearts. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam always saw the talents in people more than he saw the weaknesses in people. Umar radiallahu anh wanted to kill Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Yet Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam made dua, oh Allah, strengthen Islam with Umar. Today, Umar lies resting next to Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Khalid bin Walid radiallahu anh was the cause of 70 Sahaba dying on Uhud, being made shaheed, including Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's uncle Hamza, whose liver was chewed on. Yet Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam wrote a letter to him, "O Khalid, a man of your intelligence, when will you see the beauty of Islam?" When he accepted Islam, he became Sayfun min Suyufillah. And like that, there are multitudes of examples when Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam focused on the talents. How did Wahshi, the very man who killed Hamza radiallahu anh and chewed on his liver, become a Muslim? How did Ikramah, the son of Abu Jahl, become a Muslim? Because Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was a man of love. And love poured from his heart in everything that he did. Parenting is not only about the natural love, but it's about approaching everything with love, with patience, with selflessness, with compassion, with flexibility, with moderation, with consideration. It's not easy. It's not easy. Absolutely. I'm a parent myself, and I got 5 boys, and boys are a handful, right? And you get it right and you get it wrong. You stumble along. Sometimes you make mistakes with your initial kids, and you try and rectify it later on. So it's not easy, but remember, it's worth it. In this world as well as in the year after, it's worth it for the reasons that I explained in the beginning. We live in a different era now. We can't do things exactly the way our parents did it. Not to say that the way that they did it was necessarily wrong. It's more about befriending your children, not to the point that they can talk to you in whichever way and that the lines between senior and junior are totally blurred. No, but maybe not as distant and not as, because maybe in previous generations there was somewhat too much of a distance between especially the fathers and the children. And it was deemed that was necessary to maintain respect. In today's era, it's different. Ali radiallahu anh, that time already said that you need to befriend your children. A key thing, and I'll conclude on this, a very key thing that you need to be cognizant of is that you must be an active parent. Today, in most instances, both parents are working. Social media takes up so much of your time. There's traffic, there's distractions. We compensate for it by giving them all the gadgets, giving them all the spending, giving them all the material items that we can afford, and trying to pacify our conscience. Active parenting is about investing in your family, not investing for your family. Look, people have good intentions. You may want to work harder so that you can buy more for your kids. But you must remember, you have to find a balance, because material items only have a fleeting time span. It's about the time that you spend with them. You won't be able to spend 8 hours a day with your kids and still work for 8 hours and still sleep and do everything else. So it's not about the quantity of time, it's about the quality of time. When you're with your kids, you must be totally focused. There must be presence of mind. You must be totally connected. It's not that, they're busy with something, you're looking at a distance. You must be emotionally and spiritually connected with your children. They must feel proud to be your kids. They must be able to come to you with any issues that they have. And even if you leave them with very little, but you must have left them with a strong sense, very little in terms of material things, but you must have left them with a strong sense of Islamic identity and a strong sense of connection with Allah. Then you've left them with everything. And there will be a means of pride for you in this world as well as in the after. The greatest thing that we need to do for our children, especially in today's age, where values and beliefs are being diluted, is to leave them with strong īmān and a strong sense of identity. Keep an eye on who their friends are. It is an indictment against parents that you would not know who your children's friends are and who they're hanging around with. Make sure that they are good friends. They must not be negatively influencing others. And more importantly, make sure that they keep good friends as well. So, because the best of kids from the best of homes have lost their way in a very short space of time because of friends. And Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has told us, it's inevitable, no matter how much you try otherwise, it's inevitable that your friends will have an influence on you. It's just about whether it's going to be positive or it's going to be negative. So yeah, time has run out on us. There's much more that I could have said, but like I said in the beginning, and I'll conclude on this, that the point here was not to bring everything on the table. The point here was not to address every possible problem that parents on the program today may have. It's about floating certain ideas, certain thoughts, certain principles, and hoping that it will stimulate thought, it will stimulate further engagement with scholars, with elderly people who've got experience in life. The most important thing is this is your investment. Your children are your greatest investment. One superstar here in South Africa was very wealthy and very well known as a public figure. They once asked him, "What's your net worth?" And he said, "My net worth is my mother, my wife, and my children. Everything else is a nice to have." So you can have all the wealth in the world, but if your kids are on the wrong track, you will have no contentment in life. And you can have very little, but if your children are on the right track, you'll have contentment in this world and you'll have success in the hereafter. So constantly make dua to Allah, turn to Allah, work on your own spirituality, apply your mind, read, take mashwara, take consultation, but don't forget to enjoy it. Don't forget to enjoy it. Sometimes we get so engrossed in wanting to be a perfect parent and wanting to find a solution for every eventuality that we forget to enjoy parenthood. And then our children are grown up and they're gone. Then we try and compensate for it by spoiling our grandchildren. There are good books on the market in terms of parenting. Excuse me. There's a book called The Ideal Father. There's a book called The Ideal Mother. There's a book called written by Maulana Habibullah Mukhtar, Tarbiyatul Awlad, the Islamic upbringing of children. I'm sure the scholars there, I think if I'm not mistaken, Mufti Mangera has also written something. Read these books, speak to the people, try your best. You'll never be perfect, but try and be the best that you can be, and know that your reward is with Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. May Allah grant us all the understanding. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdihi, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka.
So we have one question, Sheikh. It mentions, do you have any advice for how many children a couple should have, through the will of Allah, of course, compared to not neglecting the children that are already in existence?
Barakallah fiqh. I must just mention this up front. I'm not a mufti, but I'm just going to share in terms of an answer here what I've read from some of the books that I've picked up from our scholars. In this very book, I think Ideal Mother, it's mentioned that there was a time when the whole dynamic of society was different, and women would give birth almost every year or every other year. But there was a time when people lived together as an extended family, and the kid was not brought up only by one individual, not by the mother alone, but was brought up by the extended family. The grandmother, great-grandmother, uncles, aunties, everybody was part of the same household or the same yard. Dynamics have changed, and the scholars have given permissibility for spacing, not out of fear of poverty, or not because of kind of modern tendencies that hum do, hamare do, that I just want the pigeon pair, one boy, one girl, and that kind of thing. But yes, I mean, the physical strength of men and women these days, the mental and emotional capacity is highly challenged because of the kind of world that we live in. Sometimes the couples feel the need for both of them to be earning an income, even if the woman is doing home industry for that matter. And it must not be that the children are conceived intentionally so close to each other that you can't do justice to their spiritual upbringing and their physical upbringing, and you don't enjoy the children, and the children don't enjoy those years that can never be replaced by anything else later in life. So there's no one size fits all. Everybody understands their own capacity. But yes, the short answer is that in consultation with the scholars, and you explain your dynamics, there would be latitude to be able to space out the conceiving of children, so that you give them the due tarbiyah that they require, and also at a particular time then to say, look, alhamdulillah, Allah has blessed us with a certain number of children, and we now want to focus on bringing up these children. Wallahu a'lam.
Jazakallah. Second question, if you feel that your child has the wrong friend, how do we approach that with our child? How do we make it so that they aren't friends anymore in a nice way?
One thing is we must be careful of not making our children judgmental. So, broad phrases like, hey, that kid there comes from a bad home, and that one's mother is like this, and I want you to abstain. Even if the kid ends up abstaining for being friends with that child, it's going to create within them a psyche of looking down on people. Or they lose respect for their parents and say, no, but I know this to be a good person and his mother to be a good mother, so why are you talking negatively about these things? We need to sit down with the child and make them realize that our concern is based on their own best interests, and tell them, look, this is what I would prefer, and I'm hoping you're not going to spend too much of time with this kind of kid, because these are the concerns that I have. But if you still end up spending time with this child and anything comes to the fore that you don't understand, then you come home and you speak to me, so I can explain it to you and I can know. There may be very extreme cases where there has to be direct intervention and very little negotiation with children. Extreme circumstances call for that. In the end of the day, a parent has to be a parent. You can't negotiate with your kid on every matter. Sometimes you've got to put your foot down and say, this is not acceptable. for the betterment of the kid. But most of the times, if we sit down with our children and tell them, this is the kind of friends that I want you to have, be proactive before they become friends. This is the kind of friends I don't want you to have. It's not about being judgmental. It's not about, we all have our weaknesses, but I don't want you to lose your way. I don't want you to lose focus. So if you're involved in your child's life and you know, then you are able to guide them proactively rather than reactively.
Next question. Assalamu alaikum, dear Shaykh. Do you have any thoughts of homeschooling in the current circumstances, especially in the West?
Yeah, this is a very interesting discussion, very interesting question. Forget the West as such, but even here in South Africa, perhaps for slightly different reasons, it's an ongoing topic, and there's two schools of thought. There are those who feel that homeschooling makes the children very insular, and then later on they find it difficult to integrate in broader society. And then there are those who feel no, it's more helpful in especially the early years to keep them in an environment that makes them more conducive to receiving the right kind of values and shaping their identity in the right way. What I would suggest, I mean, it depends on each person's dynamics. There's no right or wrong here. If you can tutor your child yourself properly without adding further burden on your other responsibilities, then why not? But at the same time, I've seen many parents who just jumped into it kind of knee-jerk, kind of impulsively. No, things are too bad happening there in the schools, even in the Muslim schools, because in the Muslim schools, you can't control the background of other kids. That's a reality. Kids come from broken homes. They come from different backgrounds. They come with their own cultural baggage, which then to an extent rubs off on your child. So if in your particular dynamic you feel the need, I would say research it properly. I found more often than not that people that go into it without researching it properly, they end up causing a bit of a mess for themselves and for the kids, because they do it for a year or two and then they send them right back to school. And then what happens is that the kid is now behind everybody else, and they're neither here nor there. So the only advice I can give is that there's nothing wrong with doing it, but don't do it impulsively. Consider your circumstances very carefully. The time factor is most important. The stress factor on the parent, because the parent is not a teacher by profession. And now all of a sudden you're going to do a variety of subjects and there's a variety of workbooks. If after research and consultation and contemplation and istikhara and all of that, then bismillah, and the outcome is in the hands of Allah.
Jazakumullah. Assalamu alaikum. My greatest concern is being too strict and then it backfiring. What is the best balance in implementing the Sharia in this toxic fitna-filled environment?
The more we read Seerah, the more we will be able to understand what is the balance in our own context. You see, you can't answer a question very directly in terms of what is the balance, because we know we are ummatan wasata, that there must be balance in everything. There must be balance in our marriages, there must be balance in our work relationships. But the obvious question that will result is that in my own context, what is the balance? Now, the only way to figure that out is by constant connection with the Seerah. And I always advocate this in all of the workshops, irrespective of the topic, because Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam came as uswatun hasana, as a comprehensive example. So you may think, but hey, in the Seerah, I'm not going to find anything about, say, the modern day challenges of schooling or the modern day temptations. No, you're not. But in Seerah, you're going to find the principles that will help you and enable you to determine for yourself what is the balance in your specific circumstance. Yes, of course, then you can consult with the relevant people. But make this a thing in your homes, that every year minimum one new book of Seerah must be read. And whilst I'm on this point, it was part of my list, but time ran out on me, is that part of tarbiyah is from the very beginning, have an Islamic library in your home. Introduce your children to tafsir, to hadith, to seerah, but at the relevant level, right? And then they progress into the more intricate stuff as they get older. And Islamic library primarily, but then other books as well. Because reading is a culture that is becoming absent in the Muslim community. And it's a tragedy for those of us who come from the ummah of Iqra. Because success is hinged on reading to a large extent. I was speaking 2 days ago at the opening of a school library here somewhere. And I mentioned this point, that in life, if you want to rise above the ordinary, you must be an avid, passionate reader. One is you read because you're forced to. You have to read for an exam. You have to read because somebody has put pressure on you. I try also in my own little way. I just went for holiday, right, recently. And it was a holiday from Lenasia, where I stay, to the garden route, which is about 1,000 kilometers journey one way, and then 1,000 kilometers return. And I said to the kids, look, this is how it's going to be. When we get into the car, after reading the dua of Safar, each one of us will read a portion of the Quran independently, but we must be able to hear each other for about half an hour. Then we will listen to a recitation of the Quran. Now, in my family, everyone loves the recitation of Shaykh Sulaimaan, and that's 1 hour. I asked each one of them to go to my library in the house and to choose a book. And then the next hour, they had to read that book. And the third hour, as a family, whilst we're traveling on this 10-hour journey, we were going to have a discussion. So I would say, Muhammad, you are reading Hakimul Ummad's book on the wisdom behind actions, because he's the eldest. So that's the book he chose. Tell me, what have you read? What has fascinated you? Explain it at a lower level to your younger brothers. Do you have any questions in this regard? Can I answer your questions? And 3 hours into the journey, fine. Now do whatever you want. So then take out your iPad, take out your iPhone. You want to play in the sheets on the car sound system, by all means. During lockdown, we followed a similar process because everybody was stuck at home. Every day, after supper, right up till Isha, what did you read today? Besides your Quran and besides the Salah, the books that you read. So if we as parents start reading Seerah and we make our children reading Seerah, it makes parenting from our perspective easier. It makes them more receptive also, because they're also plugging into the same values that we're talking about. So if your kid is not reading about the importance of Salah, the importance of modesty, the importance of talking the truth, and you're trying to advocate those values, you're doing it in a vacuum. So the culture of reading.
Jazakumullah. Sheikh, we have approximately 14 or so more questions. How many more do you think we can get through?
Let's try. I'll try and maybe give short answers, inshallah.
Okay, inshallah. So how do you deal with mental health with young adults, which seems to be a live issue in current times?
Subhanallah. It's a very important discussion, and maybe one day we can have an independent discussion. Mental health, to a large extent, depends on the level of spirituality of a person. Because remember, mental health is connected to your soul. And the tragedy of the times that we live in is that physically our bodies are very fit, but spiritually our bodies are in a state of paralysis, and this creates the disconnect. That's why people are sometimes in depression, acute depression, and the experts can't find out what's the problem. The reason is there's a vacuum, there's a disconnect between your physical being and your spiritual being, because the one is overnourished and the other is undernourished. Now, there may be times when mental health issues are purely medical. It's got to do with imbalances. That's a medical thing. Right? That's not my forte. There they will prescribe medication, etc. But this is the part that we need to be careful of, that we mustn't overnourish the physical body of the children and undernourish the spiritual soul. That creates a disconnect. Secondly, nature is called nature because it's natural. We are overexposed to concrete because of the kind of environment that we live in. And I've been to the UK quite a few times. You people are, here we still have some backyard and some garden. And there it's just like the next man's door is like literally 30 centimeters from your door. So you're like in a concrete jungle and you all the time plug into technology. So that has an effect on your overall psyche and your mental well-being. So simple things like going for a walk with your kids, exposing them to greenery, exposing them to to gardens, to flowers. It does wonders, for a person's mental well-being. Try where you can. What I've done in my house, we've got a small little, what I call a patio. So we've got some gardens, some roses, flowers, and in the warmer months, we sit and we have supper there as a family. And the kids run on the grass and do whatever needs to be done. Just being outdoors for one meal a day, it's just very refreshing. So just two quick things that I wanted to share. There are many other things, but now there's quite a few questions. Wallah.
MashaAllah, Jazakumullah. My sister mentioned, as a widow parent, how does one fill the role of both a mother and father? SubhanAllah.
SubhanAllah. It's a challenge, but that's where extended family has to come in. And it's sad today that we've kind of drifted so much apart from each other. Maybe in the previous generations, especially for those of us of Indian origin, when we hear about the Gam, everybody was literally living on top of each other in one house. And maybe that was not also the healthiest of situations, but today we've drifted too much further apart. So your own brothers, your own father may be alive, your late husband's brothers may be alive, try and bring them into the equation from time to time, because every kid needs that male influence over them to some extent. You can compensate for it partially by trying to do a little bit of what a father would have done, but you cannot compensate for it fully. So try and find the right person to be a fatherly figure to your children. It may be your local alim, it may be the next door neighbor, it may be somebody, but try and find somebody who can play that part.
Jazakumullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Thanks for an amazing topic and so much knowledge benefit. Can you touch on how the men or a man's position is best delivered in the home? I.e., we have different confusing ideas. Wives and children confuse rights with oppression, and it seems we often all forget our duties. How can the man lead and be in charge without oppressing?
Yeah, look, a fundamental point here, which hopefully will enable you to assist all these subsidiary points, is that men and women in Islam are created equal but not identical. So their responsibilities and even their rights are fundamentally equal but not necessarily identical. The relationship between a man and a woman from an Islamic perspective is meant to be complementary, not competitive. So you don't judge the worth of a woman by how much she can become like a man, nor do you judge the worth of a man by how much he can become like a woman. That just goes against science, it goes against logic, and it goes against common sense. That said, now you may have some men who say, hey, I bring in the money. So I'm not doing this diapers thing, and I'm not cleaning the dishes, and I'm not sitting on the floor and building Lego blocks with the kids. You do all that. That's wrong. Your primary responsibility as a husband, from an Islamic perspective, is to see to the financial needs of the family. But the Sunnah of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam shows us that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam got down on all fours, and his grandchildren played on his back as if he was a horse. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam helped with the stitching and the needling of the clothes. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam helped with the dishes, so to speak, in our terminology. That's not the primary responsibility, but it doesn't mean you abscond from it. And similarly, the primary physical nurturing of the children is the primary responsibility of the mother. But it doesn't mean that the father can't help out and shouldn't help out on a secondary basis. So it's not about everybody trying to do exactly the same thing to exactly the same extent, because that makes men and women competitive, and that's not the way Islam sees it. There are certain things that a man has to do more of, and there are certain things that a woman has to do more of, but both have to help each other because you're meant to complement. It's not a competition. You did 5 things, so I'm only going to do 5. And you did 4 things this week, so I'm only going to do 4. It's about helping each other to find that balance. At times, the husband may be more stressed, so the wife will pick up a bit more burden. At times, the wife may be a bit more stressed. Your wife has got the flu. Now, if your wife has got the flu, then go and cook. It's not only is there nothing wrong with that, that is Islamic. And if you don't know how to cook like me, then go and buy food. Or get somebody to cook, but offer to help out. Don't make her feel obligated that now, you know what, I need to cook even though I'm sick. Because my husband, he's doing his part in bringing up. That goes against, it's an absurd system of trying to compete with each other and see how each other falls short. Marriage is all about love and compassion, helping each other so that we do the best for each other.
Very well put, Jazakumullah. Any wazifas for trying to conceive? It's been 3 years and still haven't been able to. SubhanAllah.
The dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam, Rabbi habli min as-salihin. There are other wazifas that the ulama can give you, things that you write, things that are put into water and you drink. I'm not an expert in all of that. But for me, the most effective is du'as from the Quran. Ibrahim alayhi salam, according to some narrations, was already 100 years of age when he made the dua, Rabbi habli min as-salihin. And Allah granted him a child in old age. Zakaria alayhi salam, according to some narrations, was over 80 years of age. And his wife was not that much younger than him. So, but for all intents and purposes, the woman was considered to be barren by all standards. It's not possible for you to conceive, but they made dua, and not only did Allah give them children, but Allah gave them the best of children. I know of people in my own family. My father-in-law's father, the first child was only born something like about 12 or 15 years after marriage. But after that, Allah blessed them with, I think, 7 sons and a daughter. So once the doors opened, then it was like a floodgate kind of thing. Subhanallah. And if ultimately, look, remember, whilst you're trying, even though you're not succeeding, you're getting reward. And it's natural. You go somewhere, you see people with their kids, it hurts you, right? Because you wish you only had kids. For that hurt also, Allah is rewarding you. So Allah knows who He tests in which way. Some people are tested with their health. Allah give them children, Allah never gave them good health. Some people, Allah gave them children, but they beggars on the street with their children. Other people, Allah gave them other things. Allah knows whom He tests, why. And everybody gets tested, and those whom Allah loves more, He tests them more. So just have faith in Allah, continue to make dua, but don't put yourself under too much of pressure, because children are not the be all and end all of enjoying life. Right? There's many other things that can bring enjoyment factors. Aisha radiallahu anha had no children. She was married to Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She had no children, but she led a fulfilling life. The major part of her life was as a widow. And the time, many times you feel it the most is when you no longer have a husband and you still don't have children. But there are ways of making up for that. And just trust that Allah knows what's best for you at the end of the day.
Jazakumullah. Sister mentions, I have 3 children, boy 7, boy 4, girl 5 months. Due to family pressures between husband and wife and second pregnancy, I feel I may have gone through mental health issues. I then had a very verbally rough approach to my older son. He is now not affectionate, doesn't share anything with me. I feel I've done a lot of damage. How do I turn this around?
I think you've already started to turn it around by acknowledging it. Acknowledgement is always the most difficult thing when we've made mistakes. Now, don't be too hard on yourself. You're a human at the end of the day. At least you've acknowledged this mistake. Try and make up for it as best as you can. It's not too late to instill within this eldest child of yours affection, and share what you've learned with other people and try and do it better. That's all Allah wants from us. Allah doesn't expect us to be perfect. When we slip up and when we make mistakes, Allah wants us to acknowledge it, to ask Him for forgiveness, and then to try our best to remedy it and to rectify it. Then after that, it's in the hands of Allah.
Jazakumullah. We still have 15 more questions. Shall we carry on, Sheikh?
I leave it at your discretion. You can perhaps see which ones you want, that you feel that we need to maybe touch on very quickly.
Inshallah, I'll just select a few from here then, inshallah. Okay, I have a 22-month-old girl and a 3-days-old baby girl. Since the birth of the baby girl, the elder daughter has been acting a bit different, guessing due to lesser attention now. How do we as parents manage this to make sure the elder daughter doesn't feel neglected but still having to tend to the baby much more?
The reason I'm smiling is because something happened in my home just 2 days ago. In South Africa, we got a term called a lat lamaki. It's an Afrikaans term. That is when you have a child at the tail end of your childbearing years that comes many years after the other children. So I mentioned earlier on that I've got 5 sons, alhamdulillah, but the 4th son is already 10. And the 5th son came last year after 10 years. So this baby now, just 2 days ago, we were sitting as a family. So one of the other children came and hugged the wife and said, "My mommy." And this 1-year-old, 1 year, 2 months, came running from the other side of the room, can't speak yet, only a few words, and kind of pushed everybody one side and jumped into the lap of the mother, wanting to be very possessive because it's a baby. As a baby, he doesn't understand that these are also children that came from the same womb and that were brought up in the same way. One amongst many ways of effectively dealing with is to get your older children involved with the younger kid. Get them involved in bathing him, in changing the kid. Make them feel proud that we've got a companion in the house rather than a competitor. Now, it's easier said than done when the elder ones are much elder, when they are of understanding, right? But sometimes when they're not, maybe like you've got a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old and now the baby comes. But get them involved. Hey, you've got a brother now. Hey, when this brother of yours gets elder, you're going to play cricket together. You're going to do this together. You're going to go to school together. So make them see the positive and always remind them, hey, you know what? You're my firstborn. You mention about the positivities. You never used to cry so much when you were his age. So make them feel special in their own way so that they don't see the child as a competitor. They rather see the child as a companion.